Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a seriously chilling case study today, one that completely blurs the line between human desperation, severe psychological trauma, and the dark, hidden mechanics of the occult. We're going to be talking about the story of Vishal. He was just an ordinary pharmacist living near Varanasi, but his absolute desperation led him into a really dangerous pact with something he fundamentally didn't understand. We'll be unpacking the specific esoteric traditions he invoked, looking at the massive risks of attempting untrained spiritual practices, and examining the psychological fallout that literally haunts him to this day.
Okay, listen to this. I am not gone. I am just sleeping. That is the actual haunting phrase that dictates Vishal's waking reality right now. To understand how a highly educated, rational medical professional ended up hearing these words whispered in his own ear, we have to rewind to the intense catalyst that kicked this whole nightmare off.
Section 1. Desperation and the Occult. A dangerous catalyst.
So, to really grasp how things went so wrong, let's picture the scene. It's November 2024. Vishal's mother was suddenly rushed to the hospital with severe chest pain. The diagnosis was absolutely devastating. She had a 90% arterial blockage that required immediate, life-saving surgery. And the cost? 8 lakh rupees. Vishal only had 80,000 to his name. I mean, it was an insurmountable sum for a young pharmacist. The doctors basically told him there was no cheaper alternative. It was simple and it was brutal. Find the money or lose your mother.
When you're backed into a corner like that, driven by extreme financial stress and impending grief, what do? Well, Vishal turned to a hidden family legacy. You see, his late grandfather had been a tantric astrologer, and he'd left behind a collection of ancient esoteric books and a personal diary. Searching for literally any lifeline, and kind of influenced by a random internet video he saw about miraculous wealth through dark rituals, Vishal decided to attempt a complex occult invocation as an absolute desperate last resort.
Section 2. Defining the entity. Karnapishachini. Now, according to the esoteric texts in his grandfather's diary, the Karnapishachini is a specific type of yakshini. Think of a yakshini as a wandering spirit bound by unfulfilled desires. The defining mechanic of this entity, and this is super important, is that she takes up residence inside the practitioner's ear, whispering secrets of the past, present, and future. She can grant immense knowledge and sudden miracles. But, and this is the catch, she operates on a deeply parasitic exchange. The payment she extracts isn't money, it's a piece of your soul, your morality, or even physical offerings like blood. The ancient texts explicitly warn, whoever summons her will never be alone again, but they will die alone.
Section 3. The Graveyard Ritual. A desperate invocation.
Driven purely by the need to save his mom, Vishal gathered his grandfather's diary, an iron trishul, which is a traditional 3-pronged spear, a black blanket, black sesame seeds, and Google incense. He took all this to an abandoned graveyard in Ramnagar right at midnight. The rules of this tantric ritual were incredibly rigorous. He was required to sit completely alone in the freezing cold of the graveyard, burn the incense, and chant a specific binding mantra 100,000 times over the course of exactly 21 days.
You guys, the escalation here was just unbelievably rapid. For 10 nights, nothing, just the cold. But on the 11th night, at roughly 11:45 p.m., after exactly 47,000 chants, the wind in the graveyard just completely died. Vishal opened his eyes and saw a woman hovering near inches above the ground wearing a wet white sari. Her eyes were massive, black, and had absolutely no pupils. She asked what he wanted. He begged for his mother's cure and for wealth. She smiled, agreed, but declared she would now live in his ear. The very next morning, an estranged friend of his grandfather randomly wired him exactly 1 lakh rupees. And even more shockingly, when he took his mother to the hospital, the tests showed that the 90% blockage had miraculously shrunk down to just 30%. No surgery needed. The pact was officially sealed.
Section 4. Untrained Tantra. The Missing Guru.
So here's where things go horribly wrong. In the tradition of Tantra, completing a sadhana or spiritual discipline absolutely requires a qualified guru. A guru acts as a protective shield and teaches the practitioner how to safely bind and actually control the immense energy they are summoning. Contrast that with Vishal's untrained approach. He stopped the ritual halfway through just because he got what he wanted early. He lacked a guru's protection entirely. Because of this fatal error, he wasn't controlling the Karnapishachini at all. He essentially invited a supernatural parasite into his life and left the front door wide open, totally discarding the very safeguards designed to keep him alive.
Section 5. The Parasitic Pact. Escalating Demands. Of course, a pact like this isn't free.
The very next night, Vishal felt this intense physical burning sensation in his left ear. She demanded a single drop of blood from a neighbor girl who was going to the temple, threatening to reverse his mother's cure right then and there if he refused. Terrified, he complied. In exchange, the entity started feeding him impossible knowledge. Suddenly, he knew exactly which futures and options to trade in the stock market, building up massive wealth in weeks. Down at his pharmacy, he could literally look at a patient and instantly know their ailment and the exact cure. But the deeply sinister price kept escalating. For one cure, the entity demanded a strand of a sick woman's hair. Soon, she was demanding acts of pure deceit and physical harm against others. Vishal's morality was rapidly eroding, replaced by just absolute dread.
Section 6. Exorcism Attempts. Breaking the Bond. By April 2025, the psychological toll was just too much. Desperate to escape, he consulted his grandfather's diary again. He went back to the graveyard, grabbed the iron trishul, and quickly chanted a reversal mantra. And wow, this was a disastrous mistake. The entity manifested almost immediately, but this time she was furious. Her eyes were red, and her sari was blood red. She screamed at him for trying to abandon her after taking all of her gifts. The psychic force of her scream was so violent that Vishal's ear actually began to bleed, leaving him temporarily deafened and unconscious. It turns out, you can't just banish an entity you never properly bound in the first place. Realizing he was completely in over his head, Vishal finally sought out a true, experienced tantric guru at Varanasi's Dashashwamedh. The guru examined him and revealed a truly terrifying truth. Vishal hadn't successfully summoned the entity at all. His ritual was incomplete. Instead, due to a past-life karmic bond, the entity had actually chosen him. To break this bond, the guru prescribed a brutal 21-day counter-ritual. It involved daily dips in the freezing Ganges, nightly chants of 108 mantras, and it all culminated on the 21st night, where Vishal literally had to physically pierce his own infected ear with the iron trishul to bleed the entity out. This all built up to an absolutely terrifying climax on that 21st night, as Vishal stood alone in the graveyard and plunged the trishul into his ear, letting the blood flow. The entity didn't manifest outside of him, no. She used his own voice. Out of his own vocal cords, she told him, "You cannot kill me because I am you. You called me, you accepted me, and now I will live in you." He somehow forced out the final banishment mantra and just passed out from the sheer pain of it all.
Section 7. Two Realities. Trauma versus Occult.
When Vishal finally woke up, the physical burning was gone, but there was just this cold silence in its place. And this leaves us looking at his current condition through two very distinct lenses. Through the paranormal lens, the ritual worked, but the banishment only forced the entity deeper. She's essentially a dormant possession now, literally sleeping inside his consciousness, just waiting for him to become vulnerable again. However, if we look through a psychological lens, Vishal is suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The immense guilt of performing dark rituals and hurting his neighbor, combined with the extreme trauma of almost losing his mother, likely triggered powerful auditory hallucinations and psychosomatic symptoms, which explains why his ear still feels hot or twitches.
Regardless of which lens you use, the reality for Vishal today is basically a lingering, tragic psychological trap. Today, he absolutely refuses to marry, terrified of bringing someone else into his cursed life. His left ear still occasionally twitches in the dead silence of the night. He is entirely consumed by the fear that if his mother falls ill again and medical science fails them, he will have no choice but to listen to that dark whisper and accept the pact all over again. It honestly makes us wonder what any of us would do if faced with the exact same impossible choice. He can never truly feel alone.
Which really leaves us pondering that incredibly fragile boundary between the human mind and the supernatural. Desperation is just such a powerful force. It can push rational, everyday people to break their own moral codes. Vishal opened a door he had no idea how to close. And so, we have to ask ourselves, if extreme desperation pushed him to the occult once, yielding miraculous but downright terrifying results, what happens when the silence ends and he actually needs her again? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.